We're good. Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this, make sure I'm on the mic, Planning Board meeting of June 14th. I'd like to begin by taking roll call since it does appear we have quorum. And begin, Susan Britta. Here. Will Rubenstein. Jim Sabin.
Present.
Peter Slovak.
Here.
Ken Smith.
Here.
Chris Vincent. Joanne Crowley present. So we do have a quorum. So this actually will be a formal meeting of the Planning Board. I wanted to do a Pledge of Allegiance, but I don't see a flag. We typically...
It's behind the...
There's one way back in the corner.
So should we just do it anyway? I think we should, yes. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, good evening, and thank you for joining us at this special meeting of the Yarmouth Planning Board. I am Joanne Crowley, Chair of the Planning Board, and I'm pleased to be joined here this evening with the members who just established quorum, Jim Sabin, Susan Britta, Peter Slovak, and Ken Smith. And of course, the most important person here is Kathy Williams, our town planner. Also joining us is Mark Grills, our building commissioner, and Karen Green. And Karen, I'm not going to get your title right, but she runs everything in Town Hall. The Planning Board, again, would like to thank you for joining us this evening. Last week, we had the first of these listening sessions. We also met with the Board of Selectmen to provide a status on these draft accessory apartment zoning amendments. By doing so with them, we were also able to gain a better initial understanding of some of their viewpoints on the changes contained in these draft amendments that have generated the most public attention. They were also pleased to know that these sessions will be videotaped and that they will be able to refer to them for their future reference as well as for us. And tonight we're holding our second of 3 listening sessions related to these amendments. Our purpose this evening is threefold. One, the first is to share information with Kathy Williams, our town planner, will be presenting this evening that we have gathered on accessory apartments and that we have used to inform our deliberations. So we're sharing with you this evening with this presentation, as well as everything that is on our website, all of the information that all of us have used to get smarter about what accessory apartments are, who has them, where they are, what works, what doesn't, and to present a draft to the public for you. So Kathy's going to run through a fairly detailed presentation this evening. And this information that we have really shaped the draft that is currently out for review. The second is to present, and Kathy's going to walk through these, the detailed provisions, each one of the provisions in this particular amendment. And then the third, most importantly, is to hear from you. Your questions, your concerns, your comments, your opinions, and suggested changes. This is a draft. And we want this to reflect the best thinking not only of the Planning Board, but of the members of the public who join us at these listening sessions. So let me direct you to the agenda. Kathy is presented here. First, Kathy will go through the zoning background. How did we get here? Then she will review each of the provisions of the draft amendment. We will ask, after each provision, if people would like to come up and make some comments, ask questions. And then at the end, we could have a wrap-up, and anyone who might like to make any comments at the end, we can do that. And then Kathy will run through our next steps. So with that, I'd like Kathy to begin.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Williams, your town planner. So before we get started, we want to make sure that everybody understands what an accessory apartment is. It's really that second smaller unit it has its own sleeping, it has its own cooking, it has its own bathroom facilities, but it's located on the same lot as your single family home. and it can be located within your home. As you can see on the right, upper right, if it's a conversion of your upper story, or the lower right where you're converting your garage, or even on the lower left there where you might be converting a portion of your basement. You can also have it attached to, like in the center, it can be attached to the side of your home, or it can be an addition above your garage. And then last is it could also be a detached or a separate home, like the upper left, where it's separate from your single-family home. These are also, you probably have heard, known as accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. We hear that terminology a lot. Or olden days, it was called your in-law apartment. So our current zoning bylaw, people may not be aware, but we do have a current existing accessory apartment bylaw. It's somewhat limited because it's limited to family-related, which is basically blood, marriage, or law is family-related, and also a capital A affordable accessory apartment. Both the family-related and the affordable are required to have a special permit. An affordable unit is something that typically has a deed restrictions. You're limited on how much rent you can charge. You can also need to have maximum rental rates and also income eligibility for the specific people who can rent that capital A affordable accessory apartment. In 2019, we tried to loosen some of the regulations by expanding the definition of family-related apartment to include more long-term family-like or caregiving relationships that we've been seeing, and also to loosen some of the affordability requirements, so you didn't have to do the deed restriction. You could rent it to anybody you wanted, but there was still some limitations on the maximum amount of rent that you could charge. That was defeated in 2019. Many of you may have heard in 2022, we had a citizens petition to create an ADU bylaw, really kind of highlighting that people are really interested in seeing some changes related to our accessory apartment bylaw. So the petition was withdrawn to allow the planning board this opportunity to kind of work and develop different amendments, build consensus, hear from the public, so that we could come up with some compromises. And to do that, we've been, since October of 2022, the planning board has held 14 public meetings, including an initial listening session that we had in December. We have these 3 listening sessions, as Joanne mentioned, on draft number 12 in June, and this is the second of our third. Our third one will be on June 26th at 6 o'clock at Fire Station number 2 in Yarmouthport. So we're trying to hit all the different villages. The goal for the Planning Board is to have amendments prepared for the 2023 Fall Special Town Meeting. That's typically held at the end of October, but they haven't set the exact date at this time. So to begin, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of making these changes? We're really looking to increase the number of smaller year-round rental units that are available to anybody in the town of Yarmouth. But we also want to be sure that we are protecting the character and the appearance of our single-family neighborhoods. We want to be sure that we have rental housing that can sustain our workforce, prevent displacement of our local residents, facilitate people aging in place so they can have that caregiver, and also could continue to allow family members to live close together but still have their separate spaces. A lot of Yarmouth is a seasonal community, but we also want to make sure that we're supporting a strong, stable, and diverse year-round community. We have a lot of existing housing stock right now, and we want to take a look at better ways of using it. Right now, we have about 2.2 people per housing unit right now, so there's a lot of vacant bedrooms out there, and it's relatively low density of people to home. And we also want to be sure that we are not going to be doing anything that's going to have any significant impacts to our environmental resources. We all know how important our drinking water and our estuaries are, so there's some provisions in here with regard to that as well. So we're going to pause after each provision to see if anybody has any questions or comments at this time. Again, as Joanne mentioned, we'll have an opportunity at the end. If you could come up to the mic and state your name, that would be great.
My name is Arthur Warren. Under purpose and intent, is this ADU proposal something you must do, or is it something you want to do because of goals and objectives for the community? In other words, is there a mandate for you to do this? I'm confused because what I hear is we must do this or the state will intervene. I wish you could clear that up. Thank you.
I don't know if Joanne wants to.
I can comment on that. We have an existing bylaw, and if a member of the public living in town would like to take advantage of that zoning difference, it's a different way that you can you can use your property. If you would like to use it that way for a family-related apartment or an affordable apartment, you may do that. There was no requirement for us, I don't think, back when it was first established by Massachusetts general law or anything else that required us to have an accessory apartment amendment. And we are not required to change it.
Okay.
We're not required to change it. There isn't a law that is saying you must change it. But why we are considering it is that over time, since back in 2019, we have been looking at trying to make it more flexible for people who would like to take advantage of it. And that is our purpose here.
I think what you've probably been hearing is there is a real push from the government, the state government, to try and provide additional housing options, housing choice, housing initiatives. So I think as time goes by, there might be more pressure that's applied to different communities to have more housing options available. But I think this is really something that came out of the citizens petition last year, kind of, I think it had over 200 signatures on it, kind of saying that people in the town of Yarmouth are interested in us taking another look at it. And that's what was the impetus for us doing this.
Thank you very much.
I also want to just mention that the language that you see here is actually the bylaw language to a great degree, right, Kathy? I mean, this is the language, the words that are going to appear in the bylaw. This isn't, a general presentation. This is the actual bylaw that you're going to see, that is in draft form, so that if you have any comments about content or any of that, it would be important for us to get some feedback from you on that. But what you're seeing are these segments. We're pulling them out one by one for you to look at and to comment on.
Madam Chair?
Yes, you may.
Might I add that they can also see the draft online at on the town website?
Yeah.
The actual draft's a handout right here, one of the
Okay.
handouts.
Yeah,
for
Oh,
everybody.
perfect, great.
We've looked at it. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Okay, Kathy, thanks.
So the next item up is regarding ownership and rentals. So one of the criteria is that it must be the property owner's primary residence. And we had a great bit of discussion about what that meant at the last listening session. And essentially, it is the place where you are registered to vote or would be eligible to vote. Where do you pay your state taxes? So you may still spend a little bit of time down in Florida or maybe going on vacation and visiting, but this is this is your primary residence. This is where you have dedicated your domicile to be. So we really want to do that because we want the owners to be present. We want them to be managing their property and their tenants. The second one is we do want to provide some flexibility so the owner does have the opportunity to occupy the smaller accessory apartment if that works better for them, or they can occupy the principal structure, depending on the number of people in their family and what works for them. Apartments cannot be sold separately and cannot be placed into a condominium form of ownership. We're really not trying to create duplexes here. We're trying to create smaller accessory units accessory to the single-family use on the property. We want to be sure that these are leased for a minimum of 12 consecutive months with no seasonal or short-term rentals or subletting or room rentals. The whole point of this is we want to solve this, the intent of this bylaw is to solve the problem of the year-round rental housing shortage through year-long leases. There have been some discussions at the last listening session about what about short-term seasonal employees, and I think the emphasis of this bylaw changes is related to year-round workers, year-round workforce. There's also some question with regard to why can't we allow roommates. I think the whole point here is if you can want to join up with somebody and rent, you just both need to be on the lease, so you're both there. It's not this random rental of individual rooms. The next criteria is that the owner-occupied unit, so the unit that the owner's living in, you can't rent that out in any way. So if you want to Airbnb your home, you can do that. But if you want to have an accessory apartment and rent that, you can't be renting out your home too. So you get kind of one bite at this apple of what you want to do with regard to rental on your property. And then also, who you rent to and the rates that you charge would be totally determined by the property owner. There's not going to be nothing further in the bylaw that would regulate any of that.
May I ask a question?
Could you come up to the
Sure.
mic?
Thank you. I just took a cursory look of the owners of properties in our neighborhood, and just on our street alone, several of the properties are owned by LLCs, or they're owned by family trust, either residential trusts or some attempt to either insulate the family from liability. But I'm not sure who the resident is or whether that's a domicile under your definition. Could you please enlighten us on that issue?
Kathy?
I think with regard to the ownerships, that's going to actually probably be something that ends up getting decided when somebody applies for it, so the permit through the building department. I think if it's an LLC, the likelihood that somebody is a registered voter is probably low. That would be another avenue that we could check. Are you a registered voter in the town of Yarmouth? Sometimes people do trust, like revocable trust. That's all for estate planning, and that's fairly typical. It's not because somebody else owns it. But the whole idea is that we want the person who owns the property to be living there. So there might be some tricky circumstances, and we might have a little, some questions, but I think there's enough information out there. We can ask for additional documentation to prove that they are, this is their primary residence.
Okay, I think you've got a real legal challenge there.
Can you come up?
If someone has a trust, the trust is the owner, that's not an individual. And if you require someone to declare that they are the owner and not in the name of the trust, I think you have some real challenges. So I would appreciate it if you could clear that up. And I'm trying to help you here
Oh, yeah,
in terms of
yes.
your bylaw, because it's just another way of getting around problems that could be created either by zoning or some exemption that would escape you and then hurt your purpose and intent. Okay? Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you.
Yeah.
Again, our vision here is that there's a property owner, a person, who lives in the big house, the main house, and they want to have an accessory apartment. They are there, they live there, they may live in the accessory apartment, they may live in the home, the main home, but they are there for some fairly decent portion of the year. That's another question that came up at our first listening session. So we appreciate that. That comment has come forward twice, several times now at both listening sessions, and we will make sure that we work through town council and make sure that we get this right in terms of what that definition is. Ms. Brito?
It is true, we have discussed that numerous times. Maybe we need to make a better distinction between ownership and occupancy. Maybe we need to make a better distinction between ownership and occupancy.
That's what I was.
Yeah, because I think we may run into, particularly if we end up doing any kind of hybrid bylaw, it means that in one instance, Mark would be making the decision, in another instance, the BZA would be, the ZBA would, and that is confusing enough. So maybe we do, I think it's a good suggestion.
Good point.
I
Thank
do
you.
think we need to clarify that definition has been mentioned
Thank you.
previously. And there were, at the last meeting, the other thing was with regard to property owners, did it need to be your primary residence, or could it be opened up to second homeowners? So it's still an owner, it's just maybe not someone who's there all the time. So that's something that the planning board will also be discussing as they move forward. So some of the general requirements, again, it needs to be a complete and separate housekeeping unit, so it needs to have that sleeping area, the kitchen, and the bathroom. Only one accessory apartment per lot would be allowed, and it only applies to single-family properties. So if somebody already has a duplex or it's a multifamily property, they're not eligible. You need to have a minimum of 10,000 square foot lot size in order to be eligible, and it's allowed in the residential zoning districts, the B1, B2 business districts, and the medical overlay district. So for those of you who are intimately familiar with the zoning bylaw, like we are, I've just kind of shown it up here. You can't see it in great detail, but I think what you can see is the colors. The green area in the lower left, all the yellow, the orange, and the tan, that's all our residential zoning districts. So we have a significant amount of residential zoning districts. The B2 is all along Route 28. We're all familiar with that. And then the light blue is the B1 zoning district. And the MOD is like 15 lots very close to the hospital. So the other thing that that's not eligible are any properties that already have an affordable, capital A, affordable restriction, because part of that restriction is you can't rent out any part of your home. And then any properties that were created through a comprehensive permit or a Chapter 40B, those are allowed by a state law that allows people to kind of bypass some of the limitations in zoning in order to create affordable housing. So typically, it already has either smaller lot sizes or higher density than what would be allowed in our current zoning bylaw. And again, you must follow and comply with all state, federal, and local codes and regulations. I think the building code and the health regulations are probably going to be the most significant codes besides zoning that you need to apply with. And then, of course, you need to have a certificate of occupancy is required before you occupy the unit.
Any comments? Okay, continue.
So what does the property look like from the outside, and how will it kind of blend into the neighborhood? The bylaw has requirements that the apartment is clearly subordinate to the primary residence. That's basically done because it needs to be smaller, and we'll talk about unit sizes a little bit further in the presentation. The appearance of the property and the buildings need to remain that of a single-family residence, and the design of the accessory apartment needs to be consistent with the single-family home on the property. Of course, if you live in Old Kings Highway, a little bit different requirements for you there. That's all for properties north of Route 6, and you need to get a certificate of appropriateness from Old Kings Highway. We have some criteria in the bylaw with regard to parking, requiring 2 on-site parking spaces for the apartment, plus at least 2 on-site parking spaces for the principal residence. We also provide some further clarification with regard to where this new parking for the accessory apartment can be located. We don't want it to be located in the green space in front of the main house, so we don't want people to be paving their front yard in order to be providing parking. And then we didn't want it to be within 10 feet of the side or rear property lines, because we wanted to give a little bit of a buffer between where this parking would be and your neighbors. Home offices and home occupations that are defined in Section 416 would also be allowed. These are types of things that do not have any employees coming there. There's no customers, there's no signs. Everything is fully contained within the residence. This might just be a desk someone's doing their paperwork on for their business. It could be someone making some jewelry or painting and that type of thing that would be allowed. Come
Yeah.
on up.
This is a joke. Will you require 2 mailboxes? One for the apartment and one for the primary residence?
It will have to have separate addresses in some fashion, and that will need to be determined. The engineering department is the one that assigns addresses, whether it would be 37A and 37B. That's something that does need to be determined, you're right.
Okay, continue, Kathy.
Oh, and I keep forgetting to say, this just kind of shows also another illustration of how the accessory apartment in orange is subordinate to the primary home. So kind of before we get into the discussions on dimensional standards and minimum lot sizes, I just wanted to go over a few useful definitions that you may not be as familiar with as we are. So what are dimensional standards? That's basically how can your structure be located on your property? How tall can it be? How far from the property line can it be? How much of your property can be covered by your building? That's called building coverage. You know, what's the minimum lot size for you to be able to develop on your property? And then how much frontage do you need along a street to make sure that you can get good access to your property? The next definition there is grandfathering or non-conforming lots or structures. You know, these are lots or structures that do not meet our current zoning bylaw, but they did meet the bylaw at the time they were created or the building was constructed. So we do have a lot of non-conforming lots and non-conforming structures in the town of Yarmouth. So a little example that we've given there is if you have a 15,500 square foot lot that was created back in 1972 when it was a 15,000 square foot minimum lot size, although the current zoning might be 40,000 square feet, you have a grandfathered non-conforming lot and you can continue with the use that you have. So one of the other things that the planning board took a look at was how many of these single-family residential lots would be eligible for an accessory apartment, and helped them to try and identify the different lot sizes when they came up with minimum lot sizes that they wanted in the bylaw. So you can see from this table here that 20% of our single-family residential lots are less than 10,000 square feet. So that's pretty small. 62% is less than 15,000 square feet. 87% is less than 25,000 square feet. 25,000 square feet is currently our smallest minimum residential lot size. And as you get all the way up to 40,000 square feet, 40,000 square feet is our most common residential zoning district. It was all that tan color that you saw and the orange color. We only have 7% of our lots meet the 40,000 square foot or greater. Again, kind of representing that we have a lot of non-conforming lots. So taking this information, what did the planning board want to take a look at? They wanted to be sure that when you're doing an accessory apartment, you're going to meet all of the current dimensional standards. All those things I mentioned, the building coverage, the maximum height coverage, and all the setbacks from your property. So you're not grandfathered with any setbacks that you might have now with the non-conforming structure. We want this new use and this new structure to meet all of the current dimensional standards that are in the bylaw. They took a look at different lot sizes depending on the size of the accessory apartments and determined a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet for a studio or a one-bedroom apartment and a minimum of 15,000 square foot for a two-bedroom accessory apartment. And no accessory apartment can contain more than 2 bedrooms. So to kind of reflect that in a graphic standpoint, again, you can't really see the map, although there are a couple enlarged maps in the back of the room if you're interested. Again, you can take a look at the different colors. The lots that are white or pink, those are the ineligible lots. They're either less than 10,000 square feet or they're not single family and they wouldn't be eligible. The blue lots that you see there are greater than 10,000 but less than 15,000 and they would be eligible for a studio or a one-bedroom. And then the green are 15,000 square foot or larger, and they would be eligible for up to that 2-bedroom. One thing to note here is the Zone 2 of the areas of wellhead contribution, which is this gray area, which encompasses a large section of the center of our community. And I can kind of give you a little bit of a blow up here. Anything that's in cyan is the Zone 2 of our drinking water wells. That's the contributing area that goes into and gets sucked in, so to speak, from our drinking water wells. And properties in the Zone 2 by Title V are limited to in the number of bedrooms that are allowed. They're allowed either 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet lot size, or if they have a grandfathered number of bedrooms on the property prior to the regulation coming into play. So if you have a 21,000 square foot lot in the Zone 2 right now and you have 3 bedrooms, you're probably grandfathered. But if you have a 21,000 square foot lot and you want to build a home in the Zone 2 right now, you couldn't build anything more than 2 bedrooms. So what this means is sometimes if you're creating an accessory apartment in a Zone 2, you may need to eliminate one of the bedrooms in your primary residence in order to require it to be essentially placed into the accessory apartment. So that gets us a little bit to water quality in general. So what happens outside of the Zone 2? Any additional bedrooms could be added if you're meeting the health regulations, and right now that's essentially Title V. We have been making a lot of great progress, and Spiro knows this, with the approval of the Phase 1 of the Municipal Wastewater Program, which was approved at our 2023 annual town meeting. We did include in the build-out analysis for growth within our community 10,000 new bedrooms within these residential areas, so we knew that sometime over the next 40 years we're going to have some additional bedrooms in our community. And although we're not going to be connecting some of these existing neighborhoods for a little while, we've actually made some significant progress in addressing our wastewater needs in town. And although it's kind of difficult to predict how many accessory apartments might get created by this bylaw, other communities are seeing in the range of 8 to 10 accessory apartments annually. Barnstable has seen about 24 units in 2022. They have seen the most improvement.
Kathy, if I can just quickly correct one of your comments.
Sure.
You said 10,000 new bedrooms, it's 1,000.
I'm sorry, did I say 10,000? I apologize. Thank you, Jim. 1,000 new bedrooms. So all of this information was kind of taken into consideration by the planning board when they came up with these particular provisions associated with dimensional standards and minimum lot sizes.
And these are a really important, piece of the amendment. How many bedrooms, the lot size, and these are things that, we're looking for any comments or opinions that the public might have on that. We've heard various things at our initial listening session back in December, through the public hearing last year with the petitioned amendment, and these listening sessions are meant to solicit your thoughts on this as well. So Yes, please, anyone who might have a comment. 1, 2 bedrooms, water quality, this whole run-through that Kathy just made would be important for us to get your sense on. Please.
I was wondering if you could just help me with grandfathering.
We
live
actually like to call it grandmothering.
grandmothering, okay. I was waiting for that, okay.
Grand person.
If you go back to your density with your representation
The map?
of lots under 10,000, more than 10,000,
The chart?
yeah, the actual graph is, the picture is better. It will make my point
Sorry.
right there. You'll notice that there's a great number of lots under 10,000 square feet, especially in the Englewood area, where actually 50 by 100 was an acceptable lot. Now, we've had the in-law or family apartment for quite some time, and we will talk later. We have several experiences with that we'll share. Are the 5,000 square foot lots, 50 by 100, grandfathered under the new zoning, such that the 10,000 square foot is not required? Because currently, the 5,000 square foot lot can apply for the in-law or family exception. I'm just wondering how you'll transition that. Thank you.
It's not grandfathered, and right now, the current accessory apartment bylaw requires a minimum of 10,000 square foot. Everyone has the right for dimensional standards to go to the zoning board of appeals for a variance. I don't know if you have smaller than 10,000, how you got an accessory apartment, but that is something that this bylaw would require to have a minimum of 10,000 to be eligible. Period.
Must have 10,000.
Unless you go to the zoning board of appeals and ask for a variance. It's very difficult to get a variance because you have to have very specific lot shape, soil, topography conditions.
That's a very good provision. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rob Camara. How are you? So on this topic regarding the size of residential lots, I do have a concern that the beginning point is at 10,000 to 10,999. A quarter of an acre is roughly 10,890 square feet. Half acre is 21,780 square feet. So we're proposing here tonight that the beginning point begins at 10,000 square feet. Looking at the map and the one in the back of the room, those sections in blue concern me because I feel that a lot of these homes, a lot of these properties are clustered together. They don't generally have the space that the code today has. So what I'm proposing is that we begin at 11,000 square feet, and that would give us 8,498 lots out of the proposed 13,072, leaving us with a template of 65% of the residential homes, lots available for this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Any other comments?
Can I ask I'm sorry, I missed the point.
Yeah, certainly,
11,000,
Mr.
I
Sawyer.
understand 11,000, but what was why 11,000? What was why not 12?
I'm sorry, you have to speak into the mic or we won't be able to hear you. I'm so sorry.
What I'm saying to you is that basically, we should be at least at or above a quarter of an acre for this project, okay? And I happen to live in a community that the lots are smaller than a quarter of an acre. And I know what it's already like living in my neighborhood without 2 more cars coming down the road, without the water issues. So I think if we're going to work on this project together as a community, knowing all the things that we went through with the wastewater project, for example, and PFAS and all those things, we should consider raising the size of the lots as a beginning point for the project. That's what I'm saying.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr.
I think it would be
Sager.
helpful to hear of, not necessarily your street addresses, but the neighborhoods in which people are expressing their concerns. This gentleman lives in a particular neighborhood. I'm kind of curious as to where that lies. So if we could have kind of a general idea where people live. You don't have to give us a street address, but are you in Captain's Village? Are you in
Yes, I'm near
Inglewood?
Captain's Village.
Captain's
Yes,
Village?
Yeah.
yes.
Well, thank you.
Great,
Which,
thank
if you look at the map, it's pretty considerable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For anyone who doesn't know, this is the Captain's Villages right here.
Yep. It's
Very,
the
very
big
blue.
blue.
The big blue.
Yes, please.
I'm Judy Warren. I'm connected to Arthur Warren, so, but we did have our separate notes.
We are separate
Sorry
people.
about that. So we live at Two Shore Road in the Englewood Beach area. So we certainly understand the need for more affordable housing options to accommodate the people who live in town of Yarmouth, who work here, and who are raising a family here. And we appreciate the hard work. And I caught the 12th version. That's a lot of versions. It's a lot of work. One of my initial concerns, I did go to the town meeting last week when you presented to the Board of Selectmen and looked over the proposal, and certainly one of the items that caught my attention right away was the fact that under the current proposal, 80% of the house lots in Yarmouth are eligible to have, host an ADU. So I do appreciate the gentleman's suggestion, because I did think that was an awfully high number. I was concerned about that. And I also noticed that our goal, it seems to us that the goal is to create housing that is accessible, affordable to people who live here and work here. Is there a way to require that the tenant work here, work on the Cape? My concern is that I'm wondering if this proposal does in fact make a dent in the problem of affordable housing. The previous towns that you're looking at suggest that they get about 8 to 12 units applications per year, or that number being permitted a year. That's a very small number in terms of making a dent in affordable housing issues. So are we solving a problem? Number one. Number two, there's, if the regulation could require that the tenant work here, would make some sense, work on the Cape. There's nothing in the regulations that I see that would stop an off-Cape family, couple or person from renting, being the tenant in that ADU, having a major home or their primary home or where they work off Cape, and they're simply using this ADU for weekends or summer vacation, and it's now their second home without any investment other than just the rental cost of it, which is fine. It's just that are we solving a problem, or are we simply making more units available for seasonal or part-time people who are not so much invested in our town? Third, it seems that the regulations permit the homeowner to live in the smaller unit, as you said, and rent the larger unit. So again, there's no limit on the rental cost of renting out the larger home. And so again, are we providing more housing units for people that we say, gee, we want them to live here, we want them to work here? The question of regulating the use is of concern, because we certainly see what's happening with the online rental of homes at, as well as, or I should say, we even see in our own neighborhood, homes where the accessory dwelling unit was permitted in the past for purposes of a family member. That stage of life went on. The elderly people aren't here anymore, and now those units are definitely being rented on a weekly basis. Are we doesn't seem that we're able to regulate that already. So are we adding more regulation problems? Are we tasking a committee or a board or an employee of the town of something that it simply cannot do? And you have to look at, I'm suggesting please look at how are we doing on the online rental program? Are the fees in fact being paid to the town as part of the program that for permission to rent your home for online? Are the online rentals, are they being inspected? Do they have an occupancy permit as required for renting to the public? So certainly the online rentals have already transformed our residential neighborhood of house lots into businesses, and that's already happening. And our availability of smaller homes has been sorely depleted, whether it's for purposes of purchasing a home or for rental availability. So this has certainly burdened our neighborhoods with increased traffic or summer partying and things like, you've heard this before. In regard to the design of an ADU, can you impose design restrictions? Can someone say, well, yeah, you want it to be white, but I like the color orange, and therefore, who can impose that kind of restriction and have it, stick and not meet it, not be challenged? And I got a few more points, if you don't mind.
Can I
Listening?
ask, Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Saban.
Could we have you ask your questions when we go through each? Because I know there's some other questions that you've asked that
Sure.
we're going to cover in the future in some of the different slides.
Oh,
that
is there
she's gonna
more? I'm sorry.
There's
Oh,
a
yes.
lot more to
Oh,
go.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. That is
I said,
okay.
any more questions? I thought that. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
And
Of
if-
course.
Also,
Thank
if
you.
you have
No,
them
no,
in writing and you want to submit
yeah,
them, that would be
actually-
great too.
Yeah, your comments are, clearly, you've put a lot of thought into what your concerns and questions are, and we would like to be able to answer all of them to the best of our ability. So if there's some way that you could share
Sure.
with that
I
in
can
written form.
email
Yeah,
a clean copy.
Kathy Williams would be more than
Sure.
glad
Thank
to
you.
do
That'd
that.
be great, sure.
But you've raised some really interesting dimensions of this that haven't come up before.
Madam Chair,
And Mr. Saban?
if I could maybe assist and answer a couple of her points. So one of the concerns you had was with people renting here and going off Cape for work. I would suggest to you that 48% of our current population on Cape Cod commutes the other direction. In other words, they can't afford to live here. They're living in Plymouth, Wareham,
Right.
Fall River,
Right.
and they're coming over the bridge this direction. So it's not
That's
likely that...
not quite what I was suggesting. It was rather that people who have a home off Cape and who work off Cape will come and rent the smaller unit and use it for their weekends or their summertime, their downtime.
They have to be a primary residence, so they couldn't do it if it's their second.
That couldn't happen. Thank you.
Well,
I think she's
just
talking
wanna
about the accessory.
I'd like Kathy to clarify.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the accessory apartment, so I think what we want to be clear is that people who are living in the accessory apartment needs to be their primary residence also, so it's not a
Yeah.
case.
That I
Again, the
haven't
definition
yeah,
needs to be
that
fixed.
is that in the regulations?
They have to sign a yearly lease, an annual lease. But
I
how
know
they
what's
use
to
it-
require them to live here. They can sign the lease, sure, they'd be obligated to pay the rent, but what's to require them to not just use it
It's a
on
very good
weekends?
point.
Very valid point.
Thank you.
I live in Lexington, I've got a nice house there, whatever, and I want to have a summer Cape house.
Right, and it would be a small.
And I've got money, and I'll rent it for a year.
But I want to buy something. I don't want to buy
That is a very good point. We have not heard that before.
That's a good point.
Thank
Could I
you.
make a comment
Yes,
also?
Ms. Burdo.
The issue, this came up last week, and I think we need to be crystal clear. Is this on? This issue of affordable, this draft bylaw is not an affordable housing bylaw. We discussed this several times on the board. Our existing bylaw has two components, elderly and affordable. When we
Family.
decided to redraft, we decided to do away with the affordable, I remember Mary Wagon was part of the conversation, we decided to do away with the affordable component and make this strictly a market-driven rental, whatever, especially if people are going to invest, either do their, their garage over or whatever, they need to be able to recapture. And the testimony we heard, at least at the November, when the petitioners made their presentation for the citizen petition, it was strictly market-driven conversation, is that, the young lawyers and people that want to live on the Cape and work on the Cape, the young professionals had no place to rent. They couldn't find any place to rent. That led us to the conversation, quite frankly, about the two-bedroom idea. But this is not an affordable, so your comment about, is this going to make a dent in the affordable housing issue? The answer is no. Will it make a dent in the housing issue in general? Possibly. But it is not going to make a dent, I don't think, in the affordable housing, because we're not setting aside anything for affordable, which, as you know, is income restricted. So this bylaw the draft bylaw does not do that. It is a market-driven bylaw. And we discussed that a lot, and the decision of the board was that, although it was not a unanimous decision, the decision of the board was to go with the market concept, so that if you have an affordable unit, an ADU unit, and you can charge $2,000 a month and get it, then charge $2,000 a month and get it. And with a two-bedroom apartment, you could probably do that. So that's a big distinction from where we were with our original bylaw.
Any other comments from the board? Mr. Saban?
It's not a capital A affordable, but I think, if we look at Economics 101, supply and demand, the concept here is that, this is one, I've used this a million times, I'm sorry, I apologize, but I sound like an old member of the board. Housing is an apple pie. This is one slice of the solution. It won't be affordable, but ultimately, it'll address affordability. So if we have more units, the competition goes up. Obviously, you can't charge $2,000 if the guy down the street's charging $1,000. So it's kind of like everything else. So supply and demand ultimately may have some effect on the cost that you would pay because of more units availability, but it's not a capital A affordable where we say you can only rent at a certain percentage of an individual's income. So you could rent it to a millionaire, you can rent it to an impoverished person, as long as they pay whatever your rent that you're asking.
Any other comments from the board? Okay. Why don't we continue, Kathy?
I think Judy's comments are well taken, is that we want to be sure that we've identified the problem. We want to be sure that this bylaw is solving that problem and not providing avenues and other ways for people to kind of sneak around the solving of the problem, so.
We've talked about this before. It's a pretty complex issue in terms of the dimensions of who might want to take advantage of this. For someone who's a senior aging in place, who has a large home and wants to maybe live in the accessory unit, and is on fixed income, and they want to rent their home, it solves a financial issue for them, and they are aging in place. They're staying on their property. They're there. They're living in Yarmouth. So the dimensions here are all over the place, and it's all related to who the owner is and why they would want to rent. Some might just want to rent to, have some extra income. Others might rent because they have to. So we're trying. It's just a very complicated, but this is another dimension that we've heard before, and we certainly do appreciate it, so thank you. Continue, Kathy. This is meant to be a listening session. My apologies.
So what are the unit sizes? As we mentioned, we always want it to be subordinate or smaller than the primary home. So how are we going about doing that? The studio and the one-bedroom accessory apartments, they shall not be larger than 50% of the habitable floor area, and we've defined the habitable floor area as excluding the garages, all basements, whether you have a finished or unfinished basement, unfinished attics, common entries, porches, and decks. So it can't be larger than 50% of that habitable floor area or 800 square feet, whichever is smaller. That's for a studio and a one-bedroom. For the two-bedroom, it continues to be that 50% of the habitable floor area of the primary residence or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. Regardless of habitable floor area, we want to be sure that we're creating a functional unit, so we've actually set a minimum unit size of 350 square feet. So the example that we've given here is if you have a 900 square foot ranch, your regulars, you see them all over the place in the captain's villages, and then you have a 200 square foot attached garage, and you might have like 600 square feet of your basement finished, you would only be considered to have 900 square feet of habitable floor area because that garage and that basement are excluded. So that means that you could have an accessory apartment of up to 450 square feet. And this just kind of gives you an idea. We just depicted what a 350 square foot studio might look like, a 550 square foot one bedroom, and then a 900 square foot two bedroom.
No comments, okay. Continue, Kath, thank you.
Okay. So how are we going to permit these? This has been somewhat of a long discussion topic throughout the last several months that we've had. So again, let's start with some useful definitions people might not be familiar with. Lots of times you will hear something as by right. Basically what they're talking about is from a zoning perspective, the use of the development does not require any relief from the zoning bylaw, and they can go ahead and apply for a building permit through the building department. They still need to meet all the other codes and requirements, building health, all the other regulations. They still need to get a permit from the building department to construct, then probably in plumbing and electrical and gas, all those permits are still needed. They just don't have to get any specific relief from the zoning bylaw. Special permits, that's a mechanism to get relief from the zoning bylaw, and sometimes they're for specific uses where we're not something that we're comfortable necessarily doing by right, but we want to have an extra set of eyes on it. And that's typically done through the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the draft that we have written here, it would be through the Zoning Board of Appeals. Sometimes special permits are issued by the Planning Board, but those are usually for specific larger type scale projects. The nice thing about special permits, or the consideration difference between special permits, is that they require a public hearing with notification to abutters within 300 feet, and it also allows for public comment to be accepted. The criteria that the ZBA would look for special permit approval is no undue nuisance, hazard, or congestion will be created, and there will be no substantial harm to the established or future character of the neighborhood or town. So the Planning Board, as I mentioned, did spend a lot of time talking about this. Right now, the current accessory apartment bylaw, everything is a special permit. You have to go through the ZBA and get a special permit. The bylaw is written now so that special permits would be required for all accessory apartments except for 3 very specific circumstances where we've carved out some by right options. So the first by right option is if you have a fully conforming lot and a structure. That means with the lot and with the apartment built on it, you're meeting all of the dimensional requirements. You have the current minimum lot size, you're meeting all of the current dimensional standards. So the example that we have here is if you have like a 41,000 square foot lot, you're in R40, that's a minimum 40,000 square foot, so you're meeting the current minimum lot size. You go ahead, you construct your accessory apartment and all structures on your property, your current structure that's there as well as your accessory apartment meet the maximum height of 35 feet, meet the front yard setback of 30 feet, the side yard setback of 20 feet, and the rear yard setback of 20 feet. So you're meeting all the current dimensional standards. And again, you must meet all the other requirements of the accessory apartment bylaw, such as related to appearance, parking locations, apartment size, and again, as well as all the other codes that you have. So this is just kind of showing you an example of an existing house that has 2,500 square foot of habitable floor area. 50% of that would be over the maximum 900, so the biggest accessory apartment you could have is 900 square feet and up to 2 bedrooms as a by right option as you're meeting all the dimensional standards here. So in a large lot like this, you can see how the existing home can fit nicely on here. You have an existing driveway, and then you can have like a little cottage in the back with maybe two parking spaces that can be added in this particular area. So that's the first carve-out for a by right option, if you're meeting all the current dimensional and lot size requirements of the current zoning bylaw. The second option is if the apartment is going to be located entirely within your primary residence, except for any building code required means of egress in and out of your structure. And it's also limited to a studio or a one-bedroom. So the example that we have here is if you have a 12,000 square foot lot and your home's located 12 feet off of your property line, you have a non-conforming primary structure on a non-conforming lot. But you're greater than 10,000 square feet, so you would be eligible to have an accessory apartment. So you can create a one-bedroom accessory apartment entirely within a portion of your basement with only the means of egress being visible from the outside, and that can't be located within any of those side yard setbacks. So you still need to meet all of the dimensional requirements as well. And again, you're meeting all of the accessory apartment bylaw requirements. So the idea of this particular one, you drive by, the difference that you're going to see from the street is you might see an extra entrance or a little porch cover to show how people can get in and out of the accessory apartment, and then you would have the additional parking spaces that would be visible. And the third option is if you are creating an expansion or new construction. So if you're having an addition onto your property, or you're creating a new separate structure in the back, you're meeting all of the dimensional and height requirements, you have a minimum 25,000 square foot lot, and you're also limited to a studio or a one-bedroom. So we're trying to keep these smaller lots to smaller size units. So the example that you have here is if you have a 26,000 square foot lot on an R40 zoning district, that means you're supposed to have 40,000 under the current bylaw, and your home is 14 feet off the side yard. So again, you have a non-conforming primary structure and a non-conforming lot, because as we've mentioned before, we have quite a few of those in town already. But you have greater than 25,000 square foot, and you can create a one-bedroom accessory apartment. You can attach it to the side of your home as long as you're meeting all of the current height and dimensional requirements, including the setbacks. So the real restriction here is minimum of 25,000 square foot, limiting it to studio and one bedroom, and also needing to meet, again, all the dimensional requirements. So one thing that's a little bit different, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, is the bylaw as it's written now would require any apartment that is property that's located within the Aquifer Protection District would require to have a special permit and would not be eligible for these carve-outs for the by right. So just to give you an idea, this red line here is our Aquifer Protection District, because all our wells are located in here. The Aquifer Protection District's a little bit bigger than that Zone 2 that we talked about earlier, but it is a lot, it doesn't cover a lot of the area within the center of the town of Yarmouth. So,
Any comments on this? Yes, please.
Again, I'm just confused. I'm hoping you could help me. The purpose of zoning, as I understand it, is if I move into a residential neighborhood, that's a residential neighborhood. That's the bargain I made. That's the environment I want to live in for me, my wife, and my family. Special permit, as I understand it, requires the judgment of learned people who have experience probably on the planning board or with the law and building in the community, and they sit on top of the project and basically look at it in terms of the equities and fairness to everybody, including the neighborhood and the physical requirements for the proposed auxiliary dwelling unit. Having carve-outs makes no sense to me. None. I do not see the logic. I would trust and empower the Board of Appeals or whoever the oversight committee is to use their judgment and their skills to ensure those folks who move into a residential neighborhood are going to get to enjoy the benefits, a single-family neighborhood, and enjoy the benefits of a single-family neighborhood, as opposed to living next to and living with, you heard the gentleman, increased traffic, both foot traffic if you live down by the water or automobiles. it just seems to me having automatic carve-outs or by right is just contrary to the purpose of zoning and having a Board of Appeals, which has historically allowed these, we call them in-law apartments. We have several in our neighborhood. They work. There are some abuses. And I do want to make another comment. The building department does a terrific job. The abuses are not because they don't have the ability. I believe personally they're totally, they're lacking in personnel to enforce. And you're creating even more enforcement pressure on our limited resources. Is there any thought to creating revenue with these auxiliary dwelling units that would be impressed and go specifically to the building department budget so that they could hire enforcement? Because you know what's going to happen. Let me just lay it on the line. It's happening in our neighborhood right now. A garage gets turned into an apartment. You're within 2,000 feet of Lewis Bay. You move out of the big house, the dwelling house, into the garage, and you rent the primary residence for $5,000 a week, $7,500 a week, $10,000 a week. I'm not making these up. These are real examples. All you need to do is walk around the Englewood area, Shore Road, Hedge Row, Barry Avenue, Lewis Road. This is happening now, and there is no way the building department has the resources to enforce what already is in place, and it's happening. So give some thought to creating revenue if you're going to do this. And you've got some good ideas, and there was a wonderful idea here with this gentleman raising the quarter-acre limit as opposed to 10,000 square feet. Get some revenue out of it and help fund enforcement so that our neighborhoods, we're proud of them and we can live in them with the expectation of what we bought as a single-family neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, Kath?
So look what's next.
Here we go.
So,
Teed you up.
you did. So how are we keeping track? There is a requirement for mandatory annual affidavits to the building department, basically to know which unit is being rented and to document that it's a 12-month lease and whether the unit is being used by a family member and not rented. That matters, whether you're renting it or it's being used non-rental for a family member, because rental apartments are required to be registered annually with the health department and they get inspected through the health department. And there is a $80 a year fee associated with that. And I do believe that that fee did help get a second housing inspector position funded through the town of Yarmouth. Family apartments not being rented, this is what's being done today and would continue. They're inspected every 2 years by the building department. So this is a situation where if somebody has a family related and the family member doesn't need the apartment anymore, there have been cases where someone is renting out the unit when they shouldn't be. We probably, unless somebody from the neighborhood calls us and lets us know, we would probably find that out. We typically do find that out when they do the 2-year inspections. So the building and the building department and the health department maintain a log of the approved and inspected apartments. That's how we know we have about 52 family-related apartments right now. And if you have a failed inspection or lack of annual affidavits or violation of the zoning bylaw, you're all subject to enforcement by the building commissioner and could result in the loss of your accessory apartment use. And zoning bylaw violations are subject to penalties and fines as outlined in the zoning bylaw. So all of that being said, there is staffing issues at the town of Yarmouth, it's undoubted. Everyone is pressed to do more and more with less and less. So just like, the fire department doesn't drive around in their trucks looking for smoke, they wait till they get the call. So we do need help from our neighbors to say, there's something funny going on in my neighborhood, can you check this out? And I do know that the building department has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of complaints that they receive in that fashion, and they are able to go out, not probably as fast as the neighbor wants, but they are able to go out and inspect, because sometimes they're not a violation, they are allowed to do what they're doing, and/or they notify them and the issue gets remedied, or there's a few people out there who just like to fight, and those are the ones that take a lot more. As always, they say 10% of the people take 90% of the time, and unfortunately, that is the case sometimes.
I'd just like to clarify, Kathy, if I can, hundreds and hundreds doesn't mean hundreds and hundreds with regards to accessory apartments.
No,
It's
no, no, no,
total
no.
complaints. I just want people to understand that we don't have a huge problem that's not being addressed.
No.
It's their total basket of
They
complaints.
could be building code violations or zoning violations, or even health violations, so it's not, thank you, Jim. We don't have hundreds and hundreds of accessory apartments to have problems with.
Any questions? Our building commissioner is here this evening. Mark Grillis has joined us, so if anyone has any particular questions with regard to this, we could take advantage of his time. Okay, good enough.
So what do we do with our existing family-related and affordable apartments? These units can continue to operate in accordance with their special permit and the conditions and restrictions that have been placed on them by that special permit, or they do have an option in here to convert to one of these unrestricted accessory apartments via a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. That gives a little flexibility with the zoning board to take a look, okay, this was a family-related, now let's convert it to an unrestricted accessory apartment, but it also allows the neighbors to know about what's going on. Okay. So what happens when you sell your property? New accessory apartments built after the new bylaw goes into effect would transfer upon sale, and a new affidavit would need to be provided to the building department. We've had some discussions on whether 45 days is sufficient, so that's something that we're also going to be looking into. Existing family-related, this is what's in the bylaw currently. It terminates upon sale unless the new owners record a declaration of covenants within 45 days of the sale, stating the new family member and agree to the prior conditions, and if they don't take any action, then they would need to reapply for their special permit. The same thing applies to existing affordable accessory apartments, except for, in addition to that declaration of covenants, they also may have some type of affordable housing restriction agreement that would need to be abided to. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Is it possible in Yarmouth to have a transfer fee? If someone is selling and there is a ADU, there is a separate fee for that, for the fact that a title to the ADU is going along with the primary dwelling unit. It's extra work for the town, extra work for the building department. It would seem reasonable to me, since you've turned a single-family home into a business, that you assess some cost for the extra burden on the town. Can you research that and find out if that's possible? Thank you.
We will pursue, we will take a look at that, absolutely. Thank you.
So just kind of giving a very, very quick overview of what we talked about this evening. The eligibility, so it's the owner's primary residence. You need a minimum of 10,000 square foot lot. It needs to be a single-family home on that lot. It needs to be allowed in your zoning district, and it can't be that capital A affordable or a Chapter 40B project. Lot sizes and unit sizes, 10,000 to less than 15,000. You can have a studio and one bedroom, and that's that 50% of the habitable area, or maximum of 800 square feet, but also that minimum of the 350 square feet. For two-bedroom apartments, if you have to have a lot of 15,000 square feet or greater, 50% of the habitable area, but you get a little bit larger size of a maximum of 900 square feet, and again, the minimum of 350 square feet. As you mentioned earlier, Zone 2, there might be some bedroom limitations based on the size of your lot. There's also standard provisions that we talked about with regard to parking, appearance. You also need to keep all your stormwater on your own property, code compliance, and then that minimum 12-month rental leases. Permitting, we talked about everything being special permit except for those 3 carve-outs that we talked about, and also being required by special permit in the Aquifer Protection District. And then we also just went through the inspections and records requiring those annual affidavits and inspections. So where do we go from here? The planning board is going to be digesting all of the input that we received from the 3 listening sessions and that initial input that we got from the Board of Selectmen in July and August, and seeing whether we're looking at maybe making some modifications. I think everyone's had some great suggestions and some clarifications that we will all benefit from having included in the bylaw. In September and October, the planning board, for any zoning amendments, is required to have a formal public hearing, and that will be in early September. And after that public input, they'll consider any further modifications they'd like to make, and then ultimately the planning board needs to vote to recommend the amendments and present it to the Board of Selectmen for their recommendation, and hopefully placement on the 2023 fall special town meeting. And then the planning board would move the article at the special town meeting for voting on by the voters. And again, at the end of October, but we're not exactly sure of the date at this time. And also right there is all this information here, and we'll keep updating this, is available on the town website.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other comments? Spiros, welcome.
Good evening. Spiro Matrikakis, West Yarmouth. I'm going to submit most of my comments in writing so you have them. But I just wanted to clarify, in case you know the answer to these questions. My initial thought was that this bylaw, coupled with sewers coming online over the next 20 to 30 years, is a pretty powerful tool to create the supply of housing that you're looking to do here. But before we get to those neighborhood build-outs for sewer, the applications that are going to be coming in for something like this are going to have to connect to the on-site septic systems. So am I correct in understanding that you can't build another septic system? You have to tap into the one that's there.
No, you could build a new septic system.
So you can build a second septic system
As long as
in
you
anticipation
meet
of
Title
that.
V.
As long as you're meeting Title V. And then the restrictions of Title V go hand in hand with the number of bedrooms on the site as well. So if you have capacity to build a septic system, it means you haven't maxed out your current septic system. Unless you take away a bedroom from the current house and tap into the septic system that's there. So far, so good?
So far, so
Okay, these are practical matters. Eventually, some engineer is going to advise you accordingly. Correlation of that is that these units are going to require various utilities. So are we looking to meter them separately? Is that going to be the MO? If it's a detached unit, they can have a detached water meter, gas meter, electric meter. Are we anticipating the landlord's discretion to just shoot a line over and do it that way? I mean, these are just sort of ways to distinguish what we're trying to safeguard against here, which is the abuse of the unit. My thought was, Mrs. Warren's spot on. The closer you are to water, the closer you are to that seasonal neighborhood, desirable neighborhood for the season, more likely that you're going to have folks looking at a workaround. Our rule of thumb, whether we've experienced this or whether we observed it, I used to be a chamber director, is that the annual rent generated by a 12-month lease is the same as what you would get for a 3-month lease, if it's the right 3 months. So $12,000 gets you a 3-month lease in a 1-bedroom apartment near Lewis Bay. $12,000 gets you a 1-bedroom apartment for 12 months over by Forest Road. I think that's really the only distinction that we're talking about here, is that if you're talking about doing one of these units further away from the water, there's going to be less abuse. The closer you are to the water, there's going to be more abuse. So we really do have to look at that safeguard being built into this bylaw, because we're going to get to town hall, we're going to get to town meeting, and you're going to encounter the resistance there for folks who are basically coming to the same conclusion. 12-month leases, to Joanne's point that it might be a financial necessity for the family, for the current owner to move to the accessory unit and rent out the primary unit. Are we looking at a reciprocal 12-month lease there too? So that you're not leasing out the 12-month, the primary unit as the seasonal unit now?
No, you can't rent out both units at the same time. It's very clear. Basically, if you declare the accessory apartment to be where you want to live, then the primary dwelling unit would be considered the accessory apartment for concerns with regard to the bylaw. So you could rent out the primary as, in a sense, the accessory apartment, even though it's not the smaller sized apartment.
Can I give you an example of that? And a person aging in place has a garage and a 3-bedroom house, but they're only one person. So they're going to move into the accessory apartment, which would the garage, and they may have a husband and wife and a child or two now rent the 3-bedroom part of the house. So that is now,
So my question is, are we going to be monitoring that for a 12-month occupancy as well? Or
Yes.
is that up for grabs for a 3-month lease?
No, that's a
Okay.
12-month lease.
So my terminology is reciprocal 12-month lease if you're swapping bedrooms, right? And my last comment is, much as we dislike using the IRS or the DOR for our own enforcement mechanisms, there is an actual function that they provide if you require it for various other legal reasons, which is to show that you have filed taxes at this residence in that previous year. I happen to have used it for unrelated issues, and it's not providing the first page of your 1040 to look for the address that you filed under. It's actual letter that you can request from the IRS. It says this person filed their taxes at this address in 2021 or whatever the year was. And you could use that as an enforcement mechanism if you're wondering if these 12-month leases are real or they're just folks who are renting their summer house for 3 months. You saw the lease, which said 12 months, but now you get the letter from the DOR that says, oh, by the way, yes, they did file their taxes at this address too. So you can try to eliminate the abuse of it. It's just giving you a mechanism. How you write it into a bylaw, I don't know. There might be a whole different corollary code of enforcement that goes with this. I'm sure there's a smart lawyer who thinks that's a bad idea, but nevertheless, it's trying to provide a solution for a problem that's going to manifest itself if we're not careful with this bylaw. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Spears. Any other comments or questions? Yes, please.
I was wondering if the planning board had an opportunity to do any projections in terms of the assessment of a property that now has a proposed auxiliary dwelling unit. What impact will that have in terms of raising revenue for the town of Yarmouth? Obviously, this is no longer a single-family home. This is a business. And you have the ability to rent. There's rental income available for square footage. You can do calculations. I'm just wondering if you've consulted with the assessor's office in terms of how the assessor would be dealing with these. They have experience because in our neighborhood, we have under the current bylaw, in-law or family garages turned into homes, so there must be some experience. I just throw that out for the committee's edification. Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Saban.
So any improvement that somebody makes to their home through the permitting process, and Mark can probably correct me, there's a method in which the assessors are notified, the assessors do a regular viewing of properties in town on a regular basis, so they pick up that new growth or improvements through that process. So there is a process, and obviously if you're improving your house, then we're assuming by you improving it, your values would go up, and as a result, that would affect our tax revenues for the town. So in some ways, it would increase the dollars that come to the town, should it increase the values of the homes. But the assessors check on a regular basis. They have a
My
review.
point is, that's a positive if it does raise revenue. You ought to look into it. Nothing like proposing a positive revenue solution to the selectmen.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please.
This won't be the first time that I disagree.
That's way too much information.
Yeah, thank you.
Pillow talk is one thing.
Because it's one thing to increase the value of Lot A, because it's now an income-producing property. What does that do to Lot B next door that had, you know, where, as Arthur was saying earlier, we expect it to be in a single-family neighborhood. So, which kind of also leads to another question I had. There's no limit, it could be the accessory dwelling unit could be one floor or two, correct? As long as there's square footage, livable square face. So that if you had a single-family neighborhood and the neighbor is building their ADU and it's 2 feet, that's going to have, it's 2 stories, that is going to have an impact on the immediate neighbors. It's just, it's just going to have an impact on the value of the home. Whether it's an issue about, I want to see the water in the distance, or now you've blocked my view, or just not even the view, just to have that change of that sense of the neighborhood. So maybe you do want to say your accessory dwelling unit can only be 1 floor. I never thought of that until I saw Kathy's. Yes. We were talking earlier, and we did agree on this point. Since we're going forward with the sewer, and is there we want to suggest, if you're going to allow the ADU, then when the sewer system comes to that neighborhood, for the next application period, then that homeowner with the ADU has to hook up to the sewer, as opposed to just relying on their existing septic, regardless of the age or the capacity of the septic. That when it comes to your neighborhood, in order to continue to operate on an open market ADU, that you have to hook up to the septic, was a suggestion we wanted.
Thank you.
That's something that's going to be part of the requirements. There's going to be a defined timeline when sewers come to your neighborhood, you have to connect. So that's going to be universal throughout the town. I'm not sure what has been decided on the timeline yet, but that's going to be required.
3 years.
Oh, I don't think it's that long, is it?
It's 3 years.
I thought
It's
it was
2 years
like-
plus a potential 1-year extension, right, Spiro? It's
That's typical in other Cape towns, 2 years with a year extension.
right, so it can be up to 3.
However, in town of Yarmouth's regulations have not been determined yet, and we may also take into consideration the age of the system. So if you just put it in 3 years prior, you're going to feel pretty bad if you have to flip it 3 years from now. So there might be some additional extension for very new systems.
Okay, yes, you want to be reasonable, I understand that. Going back to our earlier discussion, we were talking about the question of affordable housing, which may even be different than low-income housing in this day and age, and what's happening to rentals. That to approach this subject and say, okay, we want to lift the affordability question, or the income, the question of any upper limit on the income of the tenant, that it doesn't exist here, because we're not providing specifically affordable housing. Then what are we doing? It's like a bonanza for homeowners who want to just increase their income by being landlords. I don't see what we're trying to do here, other than increase the intensity of neighborhoods. That seems to me to be the only thing we're doing with the proposal, as who is it going to attract? And Mr. Saban, go right ahead, please. I know you're saying I'm wrong. Go right ahead, sir.
I don't want to say that you're wrong, that's not the purpose. It's to address part of the larger solution, the larger problem of housing on Cape Cod. There is a limited number of housing units available on Cape Cod. We've done this to ourselves, by the way. We're the ones, 20 years ago who decided that 40,000 square foot lots were the norm in town instead of 20,000 square foot lots. So we reduced the number of available building lots, if you will, ourselves through zoning. We thought at one time, 5,000 square foot lots down by the beach, sounds great, we'll all build cottages. Till we realized that maybe that wasn't the right thing. So we increased the zoning. So those types of things that we've done to ourselves to affect the housing crisis that we are currently in. And this whole thing is to try to find part of the solutions to our Cape Cod-wide housing crisis. So the idea is to be able to make available housing for people who don't have 46% of us driving back over the bridge to go to work every day. So it's to try to address just one part of it. It's not the answer to everything, but it's going to give us some units that our kids don't have to move off Cape, that we can age in our houses if we're ill or if you need. We had a woman come last week that was exactly why we want to do this. She needs in-house aid. This bylaw will allow this woman to live in her house in our town and be a viable member of our community if she has an aide who can live with her and help her. If not, this woman that was here the other, she'll have to sell her house and move to gosh knows where she can afford to live. So that's kind of what we're trying to do here, is look at the bigger picture of how we can address helping our fellow neighbors in our town.
I actually see that as part of the problem, sir, that what you're trying to do is to be all things to all people through one solution, through this one solution here. That is, yes, it's the most, so they're going to be a lower cost, you're going to have more units, it's going to help, if you want to help people to age in place, then let's come up with rules for that. That makes great sense. That, certainly you can have somebody just come in and live with you, but if you want to create their own little apartment, then that's what this proposal is all about. Then have us a proposal for that, as opposed to this wide open, build with these general outline and rent it to anybody that you want, is different than, gee, we want to assist people who want to age in place. Or
That's only one example. I just used age in
That's
place.
why
But also, the chambermaid at your local hotel, or the nurse's aide, or the receptionist at your doctor's office. Those people need housing too, and
Yes.
they're coming over the bridge because they can't afford to live here.
But we don't need it at the rate of 8 units a year, or even 20 or 25 units a year. And we don't need it when there's, where's the entree for that person who probably has a spouse and children in a 1-bedroom unit or a 2-bedroom unit? We're not helping that person. We're just providing more rental units for people who want to live on Cape Cod. And
I appreciate
and where's
this.
the balance to the services that we're offering? When you went to 40,000 square foot, I think it's not just, gee, we want to enlarge our square footage, make all our homes more expensive or something like that, but our town roads, we have to consider what the town roads, we have to consider the schools, consider the hospitals, or the police department, or just even the physical space that we're dealing with here. So that it's a whole balance, which drives a housing lot square footage. And I don't see that those considerations are part of this. I'm
I
concerned.
really appreciate your comments, and this is truly meant to be a listening session. And I also appreciate the dialogue with Mr. Saban, because all of us have different opinions. which is why this particular draft 12 has got a bunch of different things in that not all of us think are exactly right. But the most important thing is what you think about it for these sessions is really important to us. And clearly, it's very complicated. You know, who's the property owner? Who are they gonna rent to? How does it affect my neighbor? One of the overriding things that we're looking for some guidance from, and we've heard from your husband, and we appreciate that, is this whole notion of the carve-outs, the 3 exceptions on who has to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and who doesn't. We're looking for guidance on the size. You know, if it's a 2-bedroom, no matter what, you gotta go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. You can only have a studio or one bed. The size of the lot, we've heard some nice, some good recommendations on what we might reconsider about the size. So those kinds of things, figuring out who the people are who are going to do it and who that might help is beyond what a zoning bylaw can do, unfortunately. If we could make a zoning bylaw fulfill that mission, it would be great, but it just can't. So we've got some broad guidelines we're trying to try to fulfill. And your comments tonight have been invaluable, you and your husband, and the others who have joined in this evening.
I did make a copy of, the article in the Cape Cod Times just 2 or 3 days ago regarding the Dennis Yarmouth students who did their study on the impact of unavailable housing and how these poor families are, moving and the kids are switching schools. It's very
quite an
difficult.
impressive article.
And so I understand, we do have to address that. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you. Any other, yes?
Yeah, I'll just close for the Warrens here and then shut up. And I appreciate all your good work. Why would you ever give up as a planning board, knowing that there's a zoning board of appeals, the requirement of a special permit to change the nature and structure of a single-family neighborhood into having apartments? Why would you give up the oversight, the accountability, the authority, all the good experience that you have and the Zoning Board of Appeals has? The in-law special permit's been on the books for a while. It works. Perhaps just tweak that, and you're there. It almost appears to me, and I do not mean to impugn anyone in this room, that you have some sort of sword of Damocles over your head. I understand that this is voluntary. This is not mandatory. It's not the state telling us we've got to put a sewer in, or we got to do this, or we got to do that. This is something you want to do. You have a process in place that has worked. And I talked to prior Zoning Board of Appeal members, and they liked the process, and it was worthwhile because they were able to ask questions, detailed questions about the intent and the integrity of the proposal for turning a garage into an apartment or adding another floor to a house to rent. I think your carve-outs, frankly, are a weakness. That's just my personal take. I know they're well thought out, believe me, but it's almost like you're trying to appease someone. That's my sense. I may be wrong, and I stand corrected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I may, and I'll just make, because this is a listening session, just to share with you the history that the board has been through. There are different voices than yours, and those voices have expressed an interest in those carve-outs, and they live here in town. Okay. And so we're trying to listen to as many voices as we can and try to come to some compromise, if we can, to make this, whatever we have now, we generally think it's limiting. Generally, we think that, and we would like to make it more flexible and more workable. And that's really where we're moving. So, but we really, the Warrens, we appreciate your comments tonight. Can you join us at session 3?
Madam Chairman,
Yeah,
can I
Mr. Saban.
comment with regards to the the hammer over our heads. Are we required to do this? No. But we have been asked, there was a petition of over 200 people in this town who said, do something. So what we're trying to do is do something, because if we don't, they will come back with another petition, and we'll do it then. But is there a hammer? Yeah, there's a hammer over our fellow citizens to ask us to address this issue. So I guess that's our hammer.
No, I appreciate it. That's an honest answer. I understand where you're coming from.
But there's no federal or state or local governments that are requiring it. It's our fellow citizens who are saying, look at this problem and find us a solution. And that's what we're trying to do. Is it the answer to everything? No, I think there's some pretty good compromises in here, but it's not everything for everybody. It won't be. No, there's no zoning that is, or ever has been.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Saban. Anything else from the public? We want to thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. We just have a couple of other things on our agenda to go through our schedule that's coming up, Kathy, our next meetings. You're welcome to stay, but we're going to just move to the second item on our formal agenda. But thank you all very much for coming. We appreciate it.
Feel free to send your comments in writing to me, kwilliams@yarmouth.ma.us.
Please, thank you. So Kathy, can you run through, we've got several meetings coming up.
Yes, we have our meeting on June 21st, which is our regular planning board meeting. I think we're going to start talking about maybe some tweaks to the seasonal employee housing. Again.
It's like death of 1,000 slashes. When is this ever going to be resolved? When is the Chamber of Commerce ever going to be satisfied?
Well, Kathy and I met, and Mark met with them on Monday. And we'll brief you on that. Kathy's going to have
It's
some.
necessarily just the Chamber of Commerce.
It is the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, it's the
It is the Chamber of
community partnership.
Commerce, which is the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah,
It's their committee.
yeah.
I think the zoning
It's the
board of
Chamber of
appeals was also looking for some additional guidance. We have
Zoning Board of Appeals.
We are trying to schedule a meeting to come and together, the planning board and the zoning board of appeals. It's kind of looking maybe like July 12th, which is a Wednesday. I'll keep you posted with regard to that, but I think it would be good to hear about how they might particularly feel about the accessory apartment bylaw, in addition to any tweaks or concerns that they have with regard to the seasonal employee housing. And I do know maybe we can start touching base. I know there's some concerns about the solar canopies. We can at least get that going. And then kind of just, anything else that they find cumbersome with regard to the zoning bylaw that makes their job more difficult, and what additional clarifications we might be able to provide them.
Madam Chair, maybe we could request from the ZBA kind of a list of some, as we read our decisions that we constantly see, there are some things that come up that say, maybe we need to address that, as based upon what comments from the ZBA have been through history. So maybe in this meeting, they can talk to us about some of the issues that they're dealing with. I think sign code is obviously one. I saw something about the sign code. So maybe there's some of the things that they're having problems with,
Yep.
that we can kind of get those on the table.
I've asked Kathy to work with Dolores, who is the Kathy for the ZBA, and put together an agenda for us to look at, that would be a collaborative agenda that we agree we need to, some things we would want to get some clarification for, and some things they do.
Kathy, when will we discuss the laundromat site? The 21st?
That's also on the 21st. So there is the Chapter 40B project at 897 Route 28, the former laundromat. The application is not overly clear, in my opinion, so I think maybe the comments might need to be more of a broad brush. It's not like, here's a set of plans, comment on this very detailed development proposal that we have before you, but it is for 23 units of rental housing. 6 of them would be capital A affordable, with the rest being market rate rentals. There's also been some discussion of keeping the laundry building and converting that into some type of restaurant. So the parking might be an issue. So there's some things. I will try and work up some ideas for discussion points for that meeting. And then also we would be looking for that support letter from the planning board for the DRI, the Development of Regional Impact Exemption request for the Riverwalk Park. We got one from CEDC the other night, drafting one to go into the Board of Selectmen's packet, and then we'll have one hopefully from the planning board. So hopefully that will be persuasive, and we will get an exemption request for that. The main reason that we need it is because of being in the environmental justice population neighborhood. So those are the fun things on that agenda. And then I guess our third listening session is in-person meeting at the Fire Station Number 2 in Yarmouthport on June 26th. That's a Monday, just to mix up the days, at 6 p.m. And then our next regular meeting after that will be July 5th. I think that's when we can kind of try and digest some of the information that can kind of identify some of the talking points and discussion. We'll have all the minutes that you guys can kind of go through. At least then maybe you guys can give me some direction on, okay, what would an edit of this sort look like? And then maybe that's something that we can talk about at the next meeting in July, and maybe the beginning meeting in August, to kind of get that nailed down.
So we're good on meetings?
We're good on meetings.
Good on meetings, for sure. Okay, I don't think we have anything else unless any other members have any other questions. So may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, and a second? Second. Mr. Slovak?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Britta? Mr. Saban?
Aye.
Ms. Crowley, yes. Thank you.